All right, we're back.
And this is going to be a tricky one, I think. I have multiple tools here that I'm going to alternate between. I don't know, what is your setup over there, Sean?
Well, I've got a big, or I've got a medium-sized brush. I've got a fairly flexible nib. This is a Esterbrook 256, um, and it looks like there are some square. It looks like a lettering nib to me or something. So I'm probably going to go get a lettering nib right now and try to use that too. I'm just going to start with the Esterbrook though. Um,
I don't know what this nib is. It looks a little bit more like the ones that the manga guys use. Let me clean it up. Just have a whole bunch of nibs. This one looks bigger and more flexible. I'll switch over to the 102. This is a Browse 301 Iserhone. I don't know where I got this from, but it looked like it would do the job. It's big, it seems pretty flexible, but it also looks like it will produce, yeah, it will produce actually really thin lines. So that's cool.
so when we were looking at the artwork before up close, I noticed that it seemed to me that everything is sort of anchored around the expression. He's got fairly thick contour lines, and it looks like in the pencil stage he did an awful lot of planning of the sort of directionality, basic directionality.
Yeah, and then my assumption and the way I'm going to approach this, and I also, I'm a little bit worried because I tend to really plant my hand. And
Right.
given how thick some of these lines get, he must have been drawing with his hand off of the board
Oh yeah.
to not get a mess. So I'm a little worried about that. But my assumption is something along the lines of what I'm doing, which is focus on contour first, and like you said, being pretty expressive with it, and then blocking in blacks, spotting the blacks with a brush. And then from there, I think where you get that klimt type of feel, and it's very intentional on his part, is he's so interested in like the design aspect of everything that I think he goes back in and then really fills in all of those other little nuances
Hmm.
last, and kind of adjusts value in the mid areas quite a bit later on. And I don't know how much, like, I don't know if at this point in the state, like, he would be doing the hair. I'm assuming maybe there's some of the work being done on the hair.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am at too. I did the first little lines of the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and then it immediately just occurred to me that the hair is the balance, the counterbalance on this particular image, as is this nice cheekbone, which probably had a thick line coming through it that's
Yeah,
obscured by the hatching.
it's a little hard to tell when you have these blue line reproductions and you start putting black, the black lines that you put. That's why I'm actually prone to starting with the fine stuff when I reproduce something, because then I'm not obscuring
Right.
those smaller details. But on this one, I really think I need to stick to, like, I'm doing some detail work right now but I don't think it would have been done at this stage. I'm very worried about how wet the ink is going to stay. So my guess is he probably drew with his hand largely off of the paper. Uh, that's also going to be hard for me to do right now because we've got microphones and cameras in our face, and it's limiting the range of what my arm can do
Right.
in terms of like drawing with the shoulder. So I'm pretty worried about this overall.
Yeah, one of the things I'm already hitting up against is he was obviously working larger than I am here.
Yeah, I have it printed out at 11 by 14, but I'm focusing just on the upper portion. So I do think mine's probably a little bit closer to the actual size.
Hmm.
I will admit, once his art has always been so mysterious to me. Once I printed it out larger, it made a little more sense actually. Like the
Right.
lines seem less weird and chaotic somehow. I don't know how to describe it other than that, but it made a little more sense and it seemed a little more organized, large than it did small, which I found kind of surprising, but also heartening. Like, okay, this guy's not. I've always had him as one of these people that's like unassailable,
Right.
you know, like just and that's why you get like Sienkiewicz and Simonson and all those guys are like, well, you just can't be Toppi. But seeing it larger, it's a little bit more okay. Like this is not totally insane. It's somewhat reasonable.
I'm
This
actually having
pen,
a.
sorry, go
Go,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
This pen I have actually is pretty good for both the fine lines, but it also lets me do some of the noodly stuff. Let me do it in a black area where I can go like this with it. That's
Right.
nice. And I think that's important to some of what he does as well. What were you going to say?
Oh, I didn't. He's left-handed, or sorry, he's right-handed.
Oh, okay. You can't mimic his flicks.
These up here, I would have to rotate totally. He's got a little bit of taper to these hairlines that I can't quite
Okay.
reproduce as is.
It's been a while since we've done one of these. I forgot that that was part of your constant assessment of artists.
Right. Left-handed? Nope.
Yeah, we've done a few of these videos. We've done a few videos now without doing a recreation, which I've actually the only thing with this big brush is the ink comes out of it so quick. I don't know how you would keep drawing with it without constantly dipping. Like I don't know how you finish a line. Um, but I when getting this printed out and stuff last night, people can see like I started I started like inking this and I started doing the word balloons and stuff because I was just like I haven't drawn probably since the last time we made a video. I've just been busy. Or I haven't drawn with real pen and ink. I've been drawing on the computer. I was like, oh man, I miss this.
Mm-hmm. I almost wonder if I should stop and print it out larger, because I think that I'm not going to be able to get something that's really accurate to it at this scale.
You're
I'm
having a hard time.
I am. It's too. My lines are getting too bunched up. So I printed it out 120% of the printed size, and I think it's just not the right scale.
Yeah, I don't know what size I printed it at, like percentage wise. I all I can say is the portion I've got is printed out at 11 by 14. I'm having a real hard time with this pin on the bigger lines. I almost wonder if some of his bigger lines aren't brush. One thing with this pin that I'm using is you can color back and forth, and there might have been some of that in his work too.
Mm-hmm.
That also helps you get a thicker line without it being as wet. So I'm just gonna finish like the basic contour stuff with this pin while Sean prints that out. Sean's so much faster than me. He'll still probably finish ahead of time. And something that I always thought about Toppi, seeing his work in reproduction, is that he must draw extraordinarily fast. It looks fast, but bigger for some reason. I feel like I can draw a little bit slower and still reasonably get what he's doing. I used to think he was like a wild man that was just like drawing just at one of the introductions. I think it was Sean Gordon Murphy did an introduction, one of the books, and he's talking about how Toppi is just like this, like someone stuck an infant in a room with a crayon and just never let him out. He has that kind of primal quality to it. And I've kind of imagined that like Tasmanian devil approach to inking, and seeing it bigger, yeah, it looks a little bit more controlled than I expected for some reason. I'll be curious once you get that bigger print, Sean, if all of a sudden it feels less
Right.
wild.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. I'm gonna
I'm
pull out.
very worried though about the wet ink.
I'm gonna get out a lettering nib too.
Okay. I'm actually going to do something in those areas that you're going to use a letter. I'm going to try two different things for those areas. One is I'm going to use a flat brush. I wish I had a slightly smaller flat brush because I pre-tested it and it's bigger than I want it to be. Which is something I still think Alex Raymond might have had a flat brush.
Yeah, that's a whole other video right there.
Yeah, but it's something that we kind of came, in doing Strange Death of Alex Raymond, I kept wondering that. And I know Dave has his technique for how he got those, but something about Raymond's stuff still suggests to me maybe a flat brush. I mean, I could do it without it, but Toppi, I wonder as well. But man, his stuff is just so much fun to draw on.
Okay, let's see.
Like, he obviously enjoyed drawing so much that even just copying his drawing like taps into my primal, like that primal system that we were talking about that enjoys line and black and white. Like, I'm already just having fun.
All right, I'm gonna try out the lettering nib. I don't know. Now that I'm looking at it bigger, I'm not sure if I'm right.
It really changes when it gets bigger, right?
Yeah, it does. This is
It's
a
weird.
you're right. Organizationally, I can see it a little bit more, and I think this thick stuff is probably a brush.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use my brush and go for it, and I'm gonna see if I can't get up some speed here.
Yeah, small, it looks like he draws really fast. When it gets larger, it looks a little more controlled to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird. I've never experienced that before, where something gets larger and it just really changes my perception of how they were working.
We should note we were talking about before about paintings and reproduction. You know, if you have a judgment of a painter, you should really consider if you've seen their stuff in person or not.
Oh yeah. So I mean, this is kind of like that
It
in a
is.
very weird way. Um, Seeing it at size is changing my experience in a way that I am not used to with line art. Normally it's just like, okay, yeah, that's that same thing but bigger, which I kind of figured. But it doesn't change my perception of the making of it in the way that this is. Yeah, seeing paintings in person is absolutely essential. Well, and some painters, you'll, if you're discriminating, you'll actually not like their stuff as much when you see it
Right.
in person.
So my brush has reached the end of its useful life. I'm going to switch to another one.
Yeah, we're going to be switching tools like crazy today.
Okay.
So I think that this is kind of what he would have done. Oh, see, I'm smearing my ink. But there's actually here on the sleeve, to me, it looks like intentional smears, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I printed it out larger, it looked like hand-drawn ticky marks, like down in this area here on the sleeve. At first I thought those were smears, but then they look hand-drawn. So I thought I was gonna try some technique like this intentionally. I did it on accident over here. But now I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, so I'm going back into the contour now.
Yeah, he handles like the thin contour first and then picks up a brush, I believe, is what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And kind of deals with the thicker parts and the spotted blacks. I'm probably gonna do a lot of that stuff with a brush just because I'm a sissy and I'll smear my ink and I can't draw with my hands off the paper. He almost has a sense of like, even though his lines are broken, there's almost a sense in his contour that it's like that continuous, like almost like he's not even looking at the paper, he's just looking at. We were debating earlier too whether we think he photo references or not, and I used to think so, but the more I look at his work, the less I'm convinced of it. I think there's a general photo reference for like the costumes and stuff, but I don't know if he actually has like a specific actor for each character, like like you might assume, even though the faces seem so particular.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I think some, might be dependent on the story, but I would be surprised if there's zero reference involved. I mean, I think that the the stories I was looking at, the seems to me that the he's got one or two images of the characters and is extrapolating from there, perhaps.
He does kind of go back to like the same position of a face over and over,
Right.
which is a little indicative that he like had a reference of them. Um, but I don't know. Yeah, he if he does extrapolate, he's pretty dang good at it.
Right.
But he does have a there is a the more you look at his work compositionally, it becomes a little more predictable. Like he has his basic tricks, but they're just so damn good
Right.
that it's like, yeah, well, whatever.
We haven't talked about the spatter yet, but you notice that there's spatter on the bottom of the costume there, overlapping it.
Down in here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what and there's like it looks like he makes a line and then wipes it or something. It kind of looks like over here where I accidentally dragged the ink after putting a line down, but it looks intentional. And then it looks like he goes and draws back over that or something, but it's not quite as streaky looking. That's one of the things I haven't figured out yet is what he's doing to get the look of the sleeve.
I was thinking that the eyebrows, the big thick eyebrows, were single units, single lines, but now I think it's a built up of several different lines in there.
Yeah, that's a little hard to tell, especially with the blue line. Okay, I'm going to now try a flat brush and see what happens there because
Okay.
there are some marks that look like the eyebrows, yeah, where you want to do it maybe as like one chunky mark like that.
Hmm. Next time we do a recreation of a person who's definitely a right-hander in my estimation. I'm gonna flop it
Oh, that would be interesting.
because this
There,
is torture to me.
it is okay.
It's not
Um,
like it's not like his it's obvious that there's a ton of tapered lines, but there's a mild amount of taper, and I can't bring myself to do it in the wrong direction.
yeah, that would be frustrating. That would be interesting though to have it someone drawing it in reverse. A lot of his blacks though are built up through just pen line.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely the case with the eyebrow. I just hadn't noticed it until I was actually thinking about doing it. And
And like this part of the hat up here too, that's mostly black. Um,
oh, okay.
the reason I picked up a flat brush is the way that the lines. Ah, shit, I'm smearing stuff again. It's so hard not to smear. Um, the way a lot of the lines start so solid to me feels like a flat brush. I don't know. Because like with the flat brush, you can still get a taper if you
Hmm.
control it right. And then he has marks like I think I need a smaller flat brush, but like right here, these feel like brush lines to me. or I just don't have a thick enough pen. But I don't know. There's also that thing of like, if you have a pen that's making lines that thick, they stay wet forever. So he had to be drawing palm off the paper, which is very intimidating.
Yeah, especially if your motion is limited by a camera 4 inches from your paper.
Yeah, and you're drawing in the direction that you're not used to
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, so like this black in the cheek is definitely just like a dense, ticky tack.
And then he smudged it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some smudge in there too. Like it has a bit of like, I'm gonna do it with a brush. There's a bit of that look to it. One thing that I do like about the flat brushes is you can get them up on their edge and do pretty thin lines with it.
Right. Not unlike,
Uh,
like a marker that has a what do you call the edge,
the little wedge tip Sharpies.
yeah, right.
Yeah. So I wonder, because look, I can get like, that's almost like a or a series 7 #2 level thin line that I can get out of it. And so I think some of like these areas like this might be these like hatching with the brush, because they're very big thick lines, and it's what's working for me.
Okay. I'm
But on
finding a medium flexibility nib has given me a lot of what I'm looking for, but it's just still struggling with the directionality thing.
well, and it's gonna leave you. Do you draw with your hand? Are you pretty comfortable with your hand off the paper?
I am, if I don't have a camera over my shoulder. I picked the
Okay.
wrong. I picked the wrong. Here, maybe if I can just tilt my pelvis a little bit. There we go.
Oh, I'm having trouble too, because I'm trying to keep the mic in my face for audio quality, and then that's over one shoulder and the camera's over the other. These stripes on seems very brushy to me too. So I'm still thinking like, okay, I'm still in what he considers like the contour phase of the drawing.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna switch
That's
back to a brush.
in that I think he's setting up some of the big hatching marks, like here where it's setting like the general pattern for the thing. He's starting to think about that weave. There's a very big sense of like a weave of a mosaic. I will forever be mystified. I don't think tracing this will at all answer like what mental state he's in where he's making the decisions about which direction a line goes.
Right. Well, it's not gonna look like him, but it's not gonna look bad. This is interesting. Yeah, this is the most I've struggled with the directionality.
Because his lines flick so much,
Right.
and that's why I feel like there's, beyond the like generally chaotic nature of how the lines go down, there just seems to be a speed of application that's
Mhm.
really intimidating and impressive. And I
And
think
he
that's where that like Tasmanian devil kindergartner with a
right.
with a brush impression comes from.
And he maintained that through his career, right?
Pretty much, yeah. He towards the end, I think what happens towards the end is that his compositions get less. He's more likely to just use panels and stuff in the
Hmm.
later work. Um, but that sense of like masterful line work is really there from the beginning and maintains throughout. Yeah. Maybe a little less detailed as he gets older. Or actually, I think his lines, like, it depends, but I think some of the later work, the lines are less wild. You know, they're kind of more sensible, like, oh yeah, that's the way that you would cross hatch. Like to get that surface, that would be the right way to do it.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit more feel for it when we're doing the costume here because I can sort of see the sensibility a little bit more. Like, he wanted to get the cross contour lines of the costume that are building around the folds, and then once he's built that in, it's providing like channels of place of location to fill in with value.
Yeah, and then when he fills in the value, he starts to disregard.
Right.
I mean, it's still there to some extent, but he really focuses more on rhythm and pattern and starts to disregard form. And yeah, that's why I think it's very happens in stages where, okay, I'm going to make the thing feel very three-dimensional and formed out, and from a drawing standpoint, do a really good, like, you know, master, like the master that all the masters want to be level job of drawing and composing, and then switch even more into the composer side and draw musically within that like perfect structure. It's really, I mean, I don't know if you love pen and ink drawing, like this is just, I don't know, this to me it's the height. It's hard not to just kind of stare. Like every time I get one of these books from Magnetic, I don't even make it through reading it before I put it down and I just go start drawing. He's I think the one guy still that like just looking at his work makes me go, oh shit, I gotta go draw. Like I just can't help it.
Okay, I'm abandoning direction so that I can get something that's going to look a little bit more like the line work because I can't do it. Um,
You're just gonna draw like upside down or something.
mhm.
You got that beautiful swish swish. So I'm almost done with the brush here, blocking in the blacks. You're mostly just focusing on that head up there, but I can't help it with this, the wife in the background. Some of the lines on her are just so much fun. I'll leave her alone from now on, though.
She is a very, very Bill Sienkiewicz figure there.
Yeah,
Uh,
and and pointing out that Bill Sienkiewicz is being very, very Toppi when he's drawing a
right.
Bill Sienkiewicz figure, not the other. Not that Toppi was
No,
influenced by Sienkiewicz. The
no, I
influence
wouldn't.
absolutely goes the other way.
So this is very interesting. I'm more convinced that this is that he basically works from a limited reference. Uh, if we had unlimited time, I'd walk through that second story in volume 5 and show you what I mean.
Yeah. No, I think there's obviously some, um, but I think a lot of it, or he's very willing at least to stretch the reference for the sake of the composition,
Right.
which is, you know, that's something I really appreciate his, um, just his distortions of the figure to ensure that the negative shapes look good is something
Mm-hmm.
that I'm really trying to take from him still.
Interesting
Um,
to see the how the contour breaks down in the hair region and the sort of will-o-wisp hair, which would be way less effective if it had a contour in there.
yeah, and I'm
Block
gonna do a
reading.
lot of inking now with the brush just because of the restrictions on the motion. Stuff that I do think he did with the pen is gonna let me work in a way that's gonna dry faster.
Right. So it's getting the value build up there is starting to look more like him.
Yeah, the tough part for me is these that thick stuff in the face. You were getting that with the pen.
I did some of that with a pen and I was unsatisfied, and then I did some of it with a brush and I was unsatisfied. I,
Um,
I still think it's possible that he's using like something blunter or something that has a sort of organic, like a reed pen
yeah,
or a stick.
it's very curious. And I'm about to try something that I've seen another European master who I hope to get to on this channel, another Sergio, or wait, no, am I getting his wrong? No, Alberto, sorry, Breccia. I've seen videos of him drawing, and he uses this technique that I'm gonna try here in a minute of drawing with the razor blade.
Okay.
And I think there's some of that in the sleeve, maybe. There may just be some smearing, I'm not sure, but there's some stuff down in the sleeve that I think is indicative of drawing with the razor blade. And I'll show why, because I tried it a little bit before we got going today. Man, it's so much fun the way his lines turn.
Hmm. It it's making so far. I think it's just the build up that gives it the. All these things are happening in context to each other.
Yeah, and then when it all like resolves, it becomes maybe more mystifying somehow.
Like doing the face right now. I mean, I'm naturally. It feels natural to make these horizontal blocks in the background, for instance. I mean, it's like slightly like he's creating small units of color by number for himself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think is going on. That it's a like that's what I mean by he's putting in like, okay, this really solid drawing structure, and then gives himself within that mosaic shape.
Hmm.
And then I think the end process is just um navigating that series of mosaics in a way that's rhythmically compelling.
Right.
Ah,
And
I messed up the chin
backing away
almost.
from
My wet
backing
wipe.
away from the page and taking a look, and then seeing where he needs another value here and another value there.
Yeah, and there's a real sense of, even though it seems totally controlled, it also seems like maybe that's the childish quality of it, is it's also seems super intuitive. It doesn't, it's like so strictly composed and scaffolded, but also so playful and intuitive feeling. It's just a really fascinating combination of things. Okay, I'm gonna try this thing with the razor blade now,
Yep.
because I think this is what's going on. So I'm drawing with uh, Alberto Breccia had one that doesn't have this on top, so it's more flexible blade. And what I saw him doing was he was painting the blade with ink. I'm going to try dipping it as well, but painting the blade with ink. And then especially like this mark right here, I think is, I'm going to have to dunk it. I did it perfectly, of course, off camera. And you get that like super rectangular. No, it didn't work. There we go. And then drag. And
Huh.
I think
You might be
maybe,
right.
and I think that's where if you come afterwards and then scrape down, if it's dry enough, that didn't do it. It gives it some of that like drag that looks like it's on there. Obviously, it's super hard to control.
Right.
like there's no way to recreate it. But painting on there and then doing this, I don't know. I only tried this very quickly right before the video. But it has that look to me of, and see, it's that mark right at the end
Hmm.
where it like chunks out to a wedge that made me
Yeah,
think. And right here, I could go like this stuff here looks like razor blade to me because I can get that really flat cap.
that makes perfect sense.
Right
I don't,
there. That's a razor blade. I've never done this before. I'm doing it for the first time, so my control is off. But I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing.
think you're right.
And I've been wanting to try this. And then I think maybe what's happening is that once it's kind of dry, you can come back and scratch at it. Or he's going like this. He may just be coming back and doing this. I think this is part of what's
Right.
going on.
Like feathering the edge, basically.
Yeah, because he's got these little ticky marks in here. And they do look when I saw them smaller, I thought I'll do this up somewhere else where it doesn't matter. I thought he was just taking the razor blade and then going like this and dragging it. But if it's
Hmm.
dry, okay, you see if it's dry, it gets that texture.
Right.
I thought that's what he was doing, or like if you paint it on there so there's less ink, it will kind of do that. Let me try it again up here. So it looked like that to me, but then when it's blown up, it looks more,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of hard to pull that off. But when it's drier, I thought it was this right here. But when it's blown up, they look more hand drawn. So I think that's him just going back in and drawing with the razor like this.
That makes perfect sense.
And it like visually feels right. So totally crazy. And I can't imagine like you're in the middle of drawing with your, and I wonder too, like how much of this then is drawn with the razor, because some of those things where you're saying, oh, I think he's using um, like a flat writing nib or something. I wonder if that's not just him using the razor to get the flatness,
Right.
because it
Well,
really
once you
does.
when this is a sort of a basic thing. This is not just like an ink drawing thing. This is a art making thing. When you have used something in a certain spot and it has provided you with something that is unique visually, you want to spread that out somewhat across the page, or you
Mhm.
risk having that area have an undue amount of attention to it. Um, so, I mean, I can imagine that once he's worked a few of those motions in there, that going back in and sort of scattering it across the page might be
Yeah, he might like come over here and just do a couple little marks.
right. Let me see if I can get
Yeah.
something similar.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because this is something I was speculating on. Um, and have been wanting to try. I'm just dunking it. I'm not painting it. When I saw Brecchio do it, he was painting it. Okay, so I think this is what he did, is make the mark. And then I think the razor marks inherently kind of provide some raggedness, and I think he's just using that raggedness to determine where he's going to make his marks. So it preserves some of the chaos of the tool, even though he's going back and modifying it. He's going back and modifying along the chaos that the tool provided. So even though it's a very intentional mark later on, it has the feeling of something that happened through a natural means.
Right.
And that's really clever to me as well. You can even with these razors go like kind of back and forth.
All right, I'm gonna try out a razor. I don't have a straight razor like you. I have a angled X-Acto here,
Okay.
and I took it out of the thing. So let's try this out.
And I've seen Sienkiewicz draw with a shit, what are those called? They're like a pin that has a very flat edge. I got one in the winter time. I forget what they're called. It has a really flat edge, so it's kind of like drawing with the razor, but it's a pin. And then it will make like just a very flat line. And then if you turn it on its side, it makes a very thin line. So my drawing's getting really terribly sloppy.
I don't think I can do it with this. Let me see. How are you doing the edge like that? It's not. It's not. I'm not getting any ink off my edge here.
You have to load it up pretty good. When I saw Breccia do it, he was man, this really recreates the quality of a lot of his lines actually.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get control of it. The one I saw Breccia, even the stuff that I assume was made by pen might have been done by a razor. When I saw Breccia do it, he had a more flexible, it's the same razor, but it's not like locked in on this side, so the whole thing bends more. The
Okay.
one I have is very stiff.
Ah, here we go. Hey, what do you know? Look at that shit. That's very interesting.
And it feels right.
It does.
Like visually.
Well, this is going to be hell on my paper, but maybe that's part of what we were seeing on some of those.
But I'm really not messing up the paper at all either. I'm
Okay.
not hardly getting any damage to the paper because I'm drawing with like the flat side of it. I'm really not drawing with the razor at all.
I see what you're saying.
I'm like scraping along the
Oh,
flatness of it. You can also get, if you go up on the tip of it,
right.
it
That's the
makes a super thin line. Like you can basically, like I'm just gonna cut the paper now with the razor, but it's got ink on it. And you'll get that, like look at how it's a razor thin line,
Mhm.
but it's ink because the ink, it's actually cutting the paper and just leaving the ink inside of that razor cut.
Right.
So another like, maybe that's where some of those fine lines are coming from
Hmm.
on other artwork, right?
Yeah. This is very interesting. I'm getting a nice flat line. This is 100% looks like the target here, and that would
And you can
explain
get
some.
some taper out of them.
Right, and it would explain some of the variation that's happening too, because if you have a tool like this where the first lines are super thick, and then this is not like a nib where the flexibility is coming from the delivery mechanism. Like this, the less ink you have, the finer the line gets.
And also like the angle that you hold it at. So I didn't do it very well. I mimicked it much better. I was doing some trial runs, and look at this mark that I got in my trial run.
Oh, look at
That's
that.
that mark on that shirt right
You're
there. I
right.
just
Yep.
didn't pull it off as well. So he went like that. There it
Do it
is. I
again.
just did it perfect.
I can't do that on with my angled one, but
Okay, here we go. And that's that mark that was in there. I botched it on the actual piece, but it's a beautiful thing.
I'm getting it now. Wow. I
And
think
then
you're right, dude.
yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then I think there was a lot of, because these lines coming off of here are kind of thicker, I think there was a lot of then going back in and doing this. I don't know if he got to the point where he had perfected the drag so that the drag was kind of create, like right here, I got some of that same texture with dragging it dry.
Mhm.
I don't know how to do that yet. but I think there might be some of that. Okay, there we go. I've got the texture now. I think there might be some of that he's then modifying.
Well, I'm going to finish it with just this tool.
Okay, I don't know if I will be able to finish the whole thing because there's definitely some pin marks in there too.
Look at some of the very odd marks on the sleeve there. I think that if you scrub with the razor, you get a very peculiar, organic, like non-ticky-tacky, like this could still be with a stick. This could be, you know, a very small stick, but like this is very compelling to me.
What do you mean scrub? Like just like this?
Yeah.
Like this?
Yep. There's some of
That's
those
what I'm
marks.
saying. There's some of those, but then when I see it bigger, it looks more. That's what I thought was happening is there was kind of like instead of a dry brush, you get a dry razor scrub.
Right.
And maybe I'm just not good enough at it. The other thing I was thinking is if you let the ink dry to where it's almost dry. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's what I was trying to get. So I think the other thing is you might have to let the ink, he might just be really good at timing. Okay, I put that line and it has to get just dry enough that then I can come to the slightly wet ink with a dry razor and drag it out. Because that looks exactly like what I thought it would be. But blown up to me, it actually looks like then he drew on top of that too. So I'm not sure. I thought you could make the line and then immediately come back and drag it, but that doesn't seem to be panning out. I think you have to make a series of lines and then give it a second and then come back. Yeah, because they drag out flat if you do it right away. We'll let those sit for a minute. These are going to look a god-awful mess, but we're learning as we do this. So that's the entire point of this.
Well, this is quite the thing.
Pretty cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I saw Breccia do this, I found one video of him drawing. I was like, oh my God, that's so good. So I'm going to be adopting this and trying to get better at it. I'm going to go back to the face here and do some of the things I'm pretty sure are done with a normal pen.
Yeah, I don't know. Now I feel like I need to scuff up some more of the drawing.
But because he's so happy working in areas, like
right,
it can kind of contain itself to that area and not have too bad of an impact.
You don't think that the thing I was saying about the touch, moving that so that you have a certain amount of touch across the paper is as critical with this style?
I don't know. I mean, he might have, but no, I'm not sure. Because of that fractured mosaic look to it, I'm not sure.
Well, one thing I can say is that this is much less pleasant a sound.
Yeah, it's not as bad with the razor. It sounds nice on the mic.
Oh, good.
It's a nice like.
Yeah, I'm doing something.
Yeah. You're like doing the whole thing with it. That's cool.
I am. I've just abandoned the other tools. I think that I can just finish off the whole thing with this, and it's going to look just as good. I need to internalize how I'm doing some of these things now so that I can reproduce it later.
Yeah, this is something I'm going to be working on.
What did you say? What did you say that process is called? Autonomy?
Oh, now that you're asking me for it, I'm gonna building automaticity.
Automaticity. You know, I have spent an awful lot of time building up automaticity with the other ink tools.
Yeah.
And so it's a fairly novel experience for me to have to think about a tool like this.
Like where you have to slow down and draw everything at a speed that you're
right.
Not, it's much slower than you would normally. And it's why beginners get so frustrated at anything because they have to be so intentional about what they're doing. They're not just having fun making the thing.
Right.
They're worried about the how, because they have to be. They're not comfortable with the tools yet. And that's why a lot of, like, I think it's much more common in music that you just practice your chops.
Right.
But with art, I don't think many people anymore are disciplined enough to sit around and just do like rudiment exercises
Right.
like a musician would. You just want to jump in, myself included. Like, I want to figure it out within a piece.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have two new drum students right now, and both of them came in being able to play, basic beats already, and it's an interesting experience to make somebody who can already do a few things stop and be like, nope, you're going to play this exercise on the snare drum only, and you're going to alternate sticking the entire time. So if you left hit, now it's time for the right to hit, and now it's time for the left to hit again, and somebody who can already do a few things will rebel against that sometimes.
Oh, so bad. It's a constant problem in drawing classes. And I was the same kid,
Right.
because by the time I got to an art class at the junior college, I was already not like to brag or anything, but I was a very competent artist. Like, I had been drawing every day since I was 7. And I was going back at like 21, 22, so I wasn't 18 either. And it was very hard for me to do those rudimentary exercises because I felt like they were making me draw worse, because my
Right.
idea of good was a result that looked like the thing. But the
Right.
assignments are trying to get you to realize something else. Like blind drawing, it's not going to look like the thing. You're doing something else. And so I was like, these teachers are making me worse. And I have the same now with my students who can draw. They're very rebellious in the beginning of the semester. And I tell them, I like, look, I was the same as you. Like, you're making things that are subconscious, conscious, and that's painful. Someone who's never done it, it's not as painful, because it's like, oh, well,
Right.
he knows what he's talking about, and this is what he says.
Right. Yeah, I have to just explain to them, look, this is something that's totally different. You are training yourself to not have to think about this. You're never going to have to think about whether you're using your left stick or your right stick when you're playing a drum beat, because you'll have done these exercises.
Yeah, but for the month that you're practicing it, it's painful,
Right.
because like, you want to play a song,
Exactly.
and you're just sitting there going left, right, right, left, left,
Yeah.
right.
It's the same reason that I didn't learn how to finger pick on the guitar until I had been playing guitar for 10 years, because I had taught myself and I had got very good at doing certain things with the pick. And the idea of being basically an infant on the guitar with my right hand was appalling to me. And the only reason it happened finally is because I was music directing a play where I was supposed to play the banjo. I basically set up a limitation for myself. I said, I'm going to learn how to play the banjo and I'm going to learn how to finger pick. So while I'm music directing this play, the beginning stages of the play is basically teaching everybody the music. So I don't have to play an instrument when I'm doing that. So I told myself, I am only going to play the banjo in this whole play, and I'm going to finger pick the entire time. So no pick allowed for me, and no instrument that I'm comfortable with. And by the end of the play, I could play the banjo and I could finger pick.
But it's so frustrating for
Right.
the first little bit.
Yeah, which now I'm
Very
feeling
difficult.
so free with this. This is quite extraordinary.
And I think
it's still going to look like
think
shit.
that's one of the reasons it's easier to learn as a child, maybe, is the child is just, even just the basic, like, oh, I made it make these two noises, is like so fulfilling to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not worried about, oh, I'm not making a song yet. They don't
Right.
have those higher order desires or aims. So the lower order achievements are just as exciting.
Right.
And as you grow older, you're trying to achieve these higher order things always.
And that can actually be frustrating to an adult too. You start to try to put your framework on a kid's framework, and you'd be like, no, but you did this really cool thing. And the kid's like, well, that's the same to me as this other thing. But to the adult,
this other just nonsense that I made.
Right, exactly. Like my kid, my oldest kid, writes songs that are incredibly catchy. And he does it when he feels like doing it. And he also, makes like a cardboard sign that says, do not do not cut. You know what I mean? Like,
Like
to me, right.
nonsense activities. Yeah.
Exactly, or plays with construction or whatever, and like I have like this value hierarchy that has to do with my goals and my desires, and the fact that he can do something that like most adults can't do, to me means that thing has more value and you should do that thing.
But for him, the educational experience of whatever he's doing with the cardboard is just as
Exactly.
important to his little brain.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's important as a teacher or a parent or a person who's already got a certain sense of thing that you don't always want to try to impose your own values on something like that, especially when it's cognitively important.
Yeah, one of my biggest, like when people ask me like what's your teaching philosophy, that's like something you have to usually write a statement for when you're applying for academic positions. One of the things I've formulated over the years is I try to teach principles rather than procedures. There's a lot, like right now we're looking at procedural stuff mostly, and
Mm,
that's fine. We're trying to figure something out procedurally, but I don't like assignments where it's like lays out all the steps for the student,
no.
and it's like, you do this, you do. So I don't. One of the best examples is I don't have students do grid drawings where they
Right.
use a
No,
grid,
terrible. Absolutely
um,
worst possible thing. Yeah.
because it's a procedural thing, and it removes all of the mental work that actually teaches you the principle of the
Right.
grid. And so I try and avoid assignments that they're also called heuristics. They're like a good enough for now method to get a result while you're learning the other thing. And I try and avoid heuristic stuff like that. Okay, I've switched over to a 102 now because that other nib was just not. I wasn't able to get lines out of that nib without it just dropping. It got rid of the ink too quick.
I
I
basically
wasn't able to complete a line.
I basically stopped drawing with any tool other than the razor.
I'm glad you're enjoying that.
Yeah, I am. I don't. You know, it's interesting how much it resembles the lines that are here. Once again, I don't know if this is necessarily his procedure, and I'm not going to make some kind of claim to that. But this is certainly much closer than anything else that I used today.
My guess is that the razor was used in spots because it's not a look that I see. It's a textural look that he gets, and he doesn't use it all the time.
Yeah,
But
but
when he uses it, it seems very intentional and like, okay, it's time to get that texture.
maybe, or maybe he started that way and got mastery of the razor. I mean, I'm holding out judgment. I'm withholding judgment here because I'm finding that I can get such a wide variety of marks. Um, it's similar
Yeah, it
to
could be.
it's similar to a reed pen though, in that the which section I'm working in is determined significantly by the load on the pen.
Like how much ink is on the.
Right, and in a reed pen, it's not the load necessarily that is changing; it's the sharpness. Um, if you look at like a Van Gogh ink painting or ink drawing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can trace the development of the drawing because the fine lines are at the beginning of the drawing, and the he's running out of sharpness as he goes.
Gotcha.
And so I'm finding the similar phenomenon happening here where I've got a load, and so I can use it on the side and get a thicker line. This is I'm telling you, man, this is really might be it.
Can you get the little, because there are spots where I see the indication that the pin is like hooked back around, like right in here. There looks like there's a little bit of right here. There's a little bit of like that hook. Can you get that with the?
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I got a hook. Although, yeah,
And
some
that's
of the
usually another thing that you tend to want to
yes,
avoid. You can
I
get it.
you can get it. Yep,
All right.
it's got some back and forth. This is very interesting.
So Toppi may have been drawing with the razor blade.
Right, dude. This section right here near his hair. Do you see the place I'm pointing at? This is the best imitation of his lines that I've done so far, and that was all done with the razor blade.
Right here. Oh, right here.
In the wider area.
In the
Look,
woodwork.
yeah,
Like just the horizontal lines.
yes, but look at the character of the horizontal lines. I was thinking that was like a fairly stiff nib or something.
Yeah.
I just did that perfectly with this razor.
You're using a. Yeah, it has that like jaggediness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I had like a. That does look like that. Yeah. Maybe if I had an X-Acto knife where I could hold it more like a pin.
Here, watch me do this section, okay? You ready?
Yeah.
Check this out. Oh, I lost my load.
Yeah.
Okay.
Blew your load.
Check it out. And then this, just like that. Now,
Yeah.
I lift up and use the tip and get a series of slightly thinner lines. And then once the load starts discharging, I'll get much, much thinner lines. And I can kind of work through.
So you like do the outline with the thick lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time get it to flow now. One of the things that made me kind of see the razor is the way that they'll start with like a boxier. They start and end with a kind of boxier triangular little mark a lot of the
Right.
times. That's
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to mimic with other tools.
This wood right here, this is the perfect example. This looks exactly like it. So like the slight wander that this has is like the way that the razor can jog on with an angle change.
Yeah. It's a little hard to control the low. Yeah. And it's really about that boxy start. And like you said, when it changes angle, it like gets bigger again real quick.
Right. Yep. Which is
So this might be an explanation too for some of the. I'm gonna try something right now. We're gonna make a mess here, but some of those things where it looks like he's drawing a line, and then it like washes out. See that?
Oh, that's it, dude.
And then you dip the razor. Okay, so this is how he's filling in those blacks where you thought that he was dragging a paper on it. He's just filling in. Look at that, because then you get right. That's his ink wash right there.
That's it. That is
you get
wild.
that wave. Yeah, check that out. I think I don't know like how many other people that have talked. Look at, okay, so if I wanted to ink wash this wood grain right here. Boom. Like beautiful.
That's it.
And then you would get where he's coming back in and doing his reductive stuff. He would just be like,
right. Exactly. Well, shit, I'm gonna throw away all my nibs.
yeah. I wonder how much of this then is done that way, even because you could get like, even his whole process then could become less step based.
Yep.
And you could have the contour kind of aspects of it flowing more seamlessly. Like, yeah, doing this thicker stuff here. It's just learning how to load it.
Right. But I'm having less of an issue now that I'm this is my watercolor brain again taking over, you know. Watercolor is probably the medium I have the most mastery over. And when I'm doing something in watercolor, it's not like I'm ever thinking about my load, like the brush load, but that's how you paint. You know, your first lines that you make in watercolor are going to be heavily charged with pigment, and then as you go, you get less and less pigment. So you paint with knowing that the intensest colors are going to be in those first few strokes.
Man, and you can really like crosshatch a good area.
Sure can. I think I could do this entire thing with just this X-Acto knife. If we had unlimited time. Uh,
Yeah, surprisingly. Yeah, I bet if I got more fluid with this.
I'd be worried to work the way that you're working right now.
What do you mean?
I mean, I'd be worried that I'd cut my hand.
Oh, with this?
Yeah, I'm happy to have the holder here.
I think it would be a little easier for me too, because like then I'd be in a position I'm more comfortable with.
Right.
Like I'm not used to. Yeah, a lot of these curved lines look really good that way too, because
They
you
sure
get the.
do.
I wonder if Stan Drake used a razor, because this kind of looks like Juliet Jones' hair to me.
Right.
That I've never been able to get with the pen, but that and the motion makes more sense to me too.
Right. Well, when you've got this sort of square tip that's also razor sharp, literally razor sharp, you get a certain, especially with the jogging lines, you get a certain kind of character to it. This wood grain, this is what's convincing me.
But I also like with the Juliet Jones hair, there's a like I'm gonna do it right now. There's a curvature on the hair. I'm still not very good at it, but it's very hard for me to repeat that kind of curve with a pin, with like the flick of a wrist. But I mean, maybe just because the razor's forcing me to draw with my whole arm, that's
Right.
easier. Yeah, that could make sense. I've always had trouble making those
That's
marks.
well, that looks good right there, but the razor ones that you did look great.
Well, the razor ones are kind of hard. Maybe it's just because my arm has to be up for the razor. That could be a lot of it too. This is the part that convinces me the most, though. The drag. Oh, I never went back to this area, so the ink is now dried. You'd have to be really aware of like the dry time to get that drag effect that I was.
Yeah, but
That seems really hard to control.
once you've done a couple, dozen pages in this style, I'm sure that you wouldn't be thinking about it at all.
Yeah, and that's the automaticity.
Right.
But he definitely does go back into those areas and like do some intentional, very like he made the mark. It wasn't just the chaos of the tool going over top of the drag. That's something that I didn't see until I saw it larger. That there's definitely controlled marks throughout this area. I hope people didn't know this. And I hope there's a bunch of artists who have sat around trying to redo Sergio Toppi, and they've been doing it with just dip pins. Like otherwise everyone's like, yeah, no duh, dude. Like everyone knew that guy drew with the razor. And this could also be where I thought he had a brush. That could potentially be. Let me see if I can do it. No, that's really hard to do. But it explains some of the areas, like right there where the ink washed out. That explains some of the areas that confused me. Like why does his ink get washy in that area? It's drawing with some kind of flat surface that fanned it out more.
And I would be curious to know what the paper situation was as well, because when you're starting to get into this type of effect, I mean that can be a considerable factor.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, so then I wonder if it was an X-Acto knife, because you seem to be having like the best time with that. Or if it was, because when I saw Sergio Breccia do, or sorry, I keep saying Sergio, I think it's Alberto Breccia. He was using like what I have, a flat razor, but it was much more flexible. And that seemed to be part of it too. Mine is very rigid. So we're gonna do the Breccia video sometime in the not too distant future. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and order a box of those more flexible razors.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to get some different tips for the X-Acto, different angled tips, because the only thing that I haven't been able to do with this so far is the characteristic line, that flat mark thing. That's not happening with this particular angle that I have on the tip, but I wonder if it had a square tip.
That's pretty easy with this though.
Right.
I mean, like, that's the easiest thing in the world. Yeah. And being able to drop out of that like I did, coming into like square and then pulling a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice. That's what really, that and these weird little drag marks are what made me go, Yeah, look at this mark too. Okay. I'm not even drawing on it, but like, that seems like a mark that he gets a lot.
Well, look at the tree that's right below this dude here.
I don't think I have the image that far
Oh,
down.
that mark looks exactly like the tree branches that are right underneath.
Yeah. And I didn't have any images. That is one thing that I've been looking at a lot for that story I've been sending you pictures of. When he draws trees, he very much like, see, I'm not convinced that he uses it for everything, because when he draws trees, it looks like one continuous line, and I don't see anywhere where there's like evidence of him like having to dip again.
Right.
Like if you look at how he draws foliage, it's very much, man, this works really well though. If you actually like you're cutting the paper. Have you drawn with it as if you're cutting the paper at all?
No, not yet.
Try that. Try using the actual blade tip of it.
Mine's not sharp enough, I don't think, to get this paper. It's just like a, plate surface.
It works pretty well that way too. And I could see with more control how there would be some of the characteristic like dot dash dot.
Right. All right. Well, even though our images are not done, I'm going to have to retire now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made a sufficient mess of, which is appropriate for Toppi, that it becomes kind of a mess.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thanks for watching with us today, guys, and hopefully you guys can let us know in the comments what you think. But this was a very intriguing exercise.
Everybody, go play with razors. But like, be safe.
Right.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.